So, Madam Clerk, Mayor Iveson let me know that he might be a few minutes late for the meeting, so you can let me know when we can start, and Don will join us as soon as he can.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Caterina. We're just missing 2 speakers, it looks like, but you can probably get ready to start any minute.
Okay, are we live? Everything's ready to go?
We are live and streaming.
Okay. We'll give it, well, guess we can start now. So if everybody's here, I'll welcome everybody and call this meeting to order, the May 18th public hearing. And we'll start with a roll call. So Councillor Banga. I'll come back to him. Councillor Cartmel.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Zadek.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Esslinger.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Henderson.
Afternoon.
Councillor
over Sarah.
Councillor Hamilton.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Nickel.
Good afternoon, sir.
Councillor Paquette.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
And Councillor Walters.
Good afternoon,
Councillor Knack, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I've got a forgetful face.
K before W, yeah. Councillor Knack.
I'm here, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Walters, I heard you. And back to Councillor Banga.
Councillor McKeon is here too, Councillor.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Huh. I should learn my alphabet better. Councillor McKeon, I'm so sorry. And again, Councillor Banga.
Good afternoon.
Oh, there he is.
There he is. Okay, we're all accounted for. With that, if someone, Councillor Esslinger, the adoption of the agenda.
I'm happy to move the adoption of the May 18th public hearing agenda.
Second.
All in favor, please vote.
I'm a yes.
I'm a yes.
Display the vote.
Sorry, we're just missing a few votes. Councillor Paquette?
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Which meeting should we be on?
It's
I'm a
the
yes, by the way.
May 18th.
May
public
18th.
hearing.
Okay, thank you.
And we have all the votes.
Display the vote. And that's carried. Protocol items, I'm not aware of any, but any protocol items? Hearing
Councillor,
none.
could you just make one just to get some experience?
You have a protocol item, Mo?
No, I don't.
Okay, let me find the explanation, process for public hearing here. Hold on a second, please. Thank you. Okay. So I'll explain the public hearing. At this point, the clerk will call out the bylaws to be dealt with. We'll call out the names of the people registered to speak to each bylaw. Next, council will select the bylaws that they wish to discuss and vote on any bylaws that have not been selected for discussion. Council will then listen to each of the bylaws that were selected for discussion and debate. For each item, administration will first provide an overview of the bylaw, and then members of the public will be invited to speak virtually using Google Meet. Those in favor will speak first, followed by those opposed. Each will have 5 minutes to make comments. The clerk will run the official timer. However, attendees may wish to use a timer at home as well. When the speaker is finished, please stay on the line as council may wish to ask questions. After comments from the public, council may ask questions of city administration. After all the speakers and questions have concluded, the chair will then ask each speaker if they wish to speak to new information which arose during the public hearing. This process will require patience to ensure that anyone who does wish to address council has an opportunity. Therefore, council may close the public hearing and debate the bylaw. Please refrain from using the chat function in Google Meet during the meeting, as it creates issues of decorum, provides unfair advantage, and interferes with the live stream. Additionally, remember to mute your microphone when you are not presenting or answering questions. If you are experiencing any difficulties, the Office of the City Clerk has resources available to facilitate communications with those participating in the statutory public hearing process. Please reach out using the contact information provided in your registration or to the City of Edmonton City Clerk at edmonton.ca. And I see that Mayor Iveson has joined us, so I'll return the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Caterina. I'm having some real technology challenges here, but I think I'm good to go. So thank you for getting us started. The explanation of the public hearing process is complete. I assume the agenda is approved. To the clerks, feel free to call the ballots.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Items 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 will be dealt with together. Is there anyone to speak to Bylaw 19350 to amend the Horse Hill Area Structure Plan, Bylaw 19351 to amend the Marquee Neighbourhood Structure Plan, and Charter Bylaw 19352 to allow for the development of stormwater management facilities in the business employment area, Marquee?
Yes, I have Wade Zwicker to answer questions only from Cameron Corporation.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon. I have Rob Dolvoet to answer questions only from InBizTech.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And Yolanda Liu to answer questions only from Stantec.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And I have no one registered in opposition on the Marquee item.
Is there anyone to speak to item 3.4, Charter Bylaw 19702 to allow for a variety of low-density residential uses, Marquee?
Yes, I have Elise Shillington to answer questions only from Stantec.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hello. And Chris Nicholas from MLC Land.
Hi, Mr. Mayor.
Hi there. And are you to present or questions only, Chris?
Questions only, please.
Okay, so noted. Thank you. And I have no one in opposition on 3.4.
Is there anyone to speak to item 3.5, Charter Bylaw 19703 to allow for improvements to the Northern Lights Cemetery and recognize the existing utility services, Rampart Industrial?
Yes, I have Trent Portugal to answer questions only from the City of Edmonton.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, and no one in opposition.
Is there anyone to speak to item 3.6, Charter Bylaw 19633 to allow for the development of low-density residential housing and a multi-use trail, Rosenthal?
Yes, I have Sarah Sherman to answer questions only.
Hello.
Hello, from IBI Group, and Catherine Shaw-Quebec, also from IBI Group, also to answer questions only.
Good afternoon.
And
Good
Mr. Mayor, we have an additional speaker for this item, PJ Pescod. Questions only in favor.
Okay. PJ, are you there?
Yeah, here. Good afternoon.
Welcome. And I have no one in opposition.
Is there anyone to speak to item 3.7, Charter Bylaw 19705 to allow for low-density residential development, Rosenthal?
I have no one registered on this item, either in favor or in opposition.
And we also have PJ Pescott on this item as well, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, okay.
Hi.
Excellent. Thank you. Next.
Items 3.8 and 3.9 will be dealt with together. Is there anyone to speak to bylaw 19697, amendment to the Kavanaugh Neighborhood Area Structure Plan, and Charter bylaw 19698 to allow for low and medium-rise multi-unit housing, low-density residential uses, public park space, and the protection of a natural area, Kavanaugh?
Yes, I have Wade Zwicker again to answer questions only from Cameron, Yolanda Liu again to answer questions only from Stantec, and Elise Shillington to answer questions only from Stantec. Elise, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Welcome. And Chris Nicholas, who we heard from previously from MLC. And I have no one in opposition.
Is there anyone to speak to item 3.10, Charter bylaw 19693, to allow for a range of low-density housing and row housing, the uplands?
Yes. Pardon me. I have Jamie Kidlarchuk to answer questions only from Qualico.
Yep, I'm here, thanks.
And Rihanna Raymond to answer questions only, also from Qualico.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and no one in opposition.
Is there anyone to speak to item 3.11, Charter bylaw 19694, to allow for the development of duplex, single, and semi-detached housing, Secord?
Yes, I have Elise Shillington to answer questions only from Stantec again, and Chris Nicholas again from MLC, presumably also questions only. And no one in opposition.
Is there anyone to speak to item 3.12, Charter bylaw 19695, to allow for the development of duplex, single, and semi-detached housing, Secord?
Yes, I have Elise Shillington again from Stantec and Chris Nicholas again from MLC to answer questions only, and no one in opposition.
Is there anyone to speak to item 3.13, bylaw 19696, amendment to the Cashman Neighborhood Area Structure Plan?
Yes, I have Neil Wasadik to answer questions only from the City of Edmonton.
Is it going to end soon?
Hello, and no one in opposition.
Is there anyone to speak to item 3.14, Charter bylaw 19654, to assemble land required for road right-of-way and municipal reserve park space, Hudson?
Yes, I have Sarah McCartney to answer questions only from 1525758 Alberta Limited and J. Westman Investments, Inc.
Yes, hello.
Hello, and no one in opposition.
Items 3.15 and 3.16 will be dealt with together. Is there anyone to deal with bylaw 19699 to amend the Ellerslie Area Structure Plan and Charter bylaw 19700 to allow for a range of commercial uses, Ellerslie Industrial?
Yes, I have Eric Sen to answer questions only from Select Engineering Consultants.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hello, and Jim Killow to answer questions only from Rohit Land Development.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and no one in opposition.
Items 3.17, 3.18, and 3.19 will be dealt with together. Is there anyone to speak to bylaw 19706 to amend the Ellerslie Area Structure Plan, bylaw 19707 to amend the Summerside Neighborhood Structure Plan, and Charter bylaw 19708 to allow for a range of commercial uses, Summerside?
Yes, I have Eric Sen and Jim Killow again, as with the previous item, to answer questions only, and no one in opposition.
Is there anyone to speak to item 3.20, Charter bylaw 19710 to allow for small-scale infill development, Calder?
No, I have no one registered on this item, either in favor or in opposition.
Is there anyone to speak to item 3.21, Charter bylaw 19711 to allow for low-rise multi-unit housing, McQueen?
I have N. Scott Siebel to answer questions only from Oak Point Developments.
They have not joined the meet yet, but our office has been in contact with them and they plan on joining shortly.
Okay, and no one in opposition.
Mr. Mayor, quick note that was read out as 19721. It should be 11.
19711 is the McQueen item. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Is there anyone to speak to item 3.22, Charter Bylaw 19682, to allow for a mixed-use mid-rise building Westmount?
Yes, I have Michelle Ouellette from Latitude Consulting Limited.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Antoine Gerson to answer questions only from Primont Developments.
Good afternoon.
And Michael Farrar, also from Primont Developments.
I'm from Phase Architecture, but I'm here. Thank you.
Oh, okay. And are you questions only, or do you wish to make a presentation?
Questions only. Thank you.
Thank you. And Michelle, same question back to you. Are you questions only, or do you have a presentation?
We have a presentation prepared if necessary. Otherwise, we're happy to just answer questions.
Okay. Well, I have no one registered in opposition on this item, so, but it's good to know if councillors wish to hear your presentation that you have one, but we'll put you down as questions only then. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Next.
Is there anyone to speak to item 3.23, Charter Bylaw 19709, to allow for a mid-rise building Windsor Park?
Yes, I have Alex Pagnotta.
Yes, I'm here.
Good afternoon. I have Bladen Dibben from Select Engineering Consultants.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello. I have Ian Evans.
Yes, I'm here.
Good afternoon. And Eric Sen to answer questions only from Select Engineering Consultants.
Yes, I'm also here.
Thank you. And then in opposition, I have Bruce Sutherland.
I'm here.
Good afternoon. And Sharon DeWall.
Hello.
Good afternoon. And that's everybody, I think. Have we had any additional registrations, Madam Clerk?
We have not.
All right. Then let's select items for debate. I'm guessing Councillor Henderson will select.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to click on this unsuccessfully. I'll select 3.23.
Thank you. Any other selections? Going once, going twice.
Mr. Mayor, I'll close public hearing on all others.
Second.
All but 3.23, including the omnibus.
Yep.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Banga. Please vote to close public hearing. Heard that Councillor Hamilton will have to vote verbally today.
I'm a yes.
Thank you. I may have to do so as well. Let me just see if I can get in. Put me down as a yes at this point. It's still loading. So.
Thank you. That's all the votes.
Display the vote, please. Carried unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move first reading of the omnibus as stated.
Second.
On the first reading, please vote.
Yes.
We have all the votes.
Display the vote. Carried.
I'll move second reading of the omnibus as stated.
Second.
On second reading, please vote.
Yes.
We have all the votes.
Display the vote, please. Carried.
I'll move consideration for third reading on the omnibus as stated.
Second.
To allow third reading to proceed, please vote.
Yes.
Councillor Nicol? Thank you. We have all the votes.
Display the vote. Carried unanimously.
And Mr. Mayor, I'll move third reading of bylaws 19350, 19351, 19352, 19702, 19703, 19633, 19705, 19697, 19698, 19693, 19694, 19695, 19696, 19654, 19699, 19700, 19706, 19707, 19708, 19710, 19711, and 19682.
I second all that.
It's a good day's work. If it passes, please vote on third reading of the omnibus.
Yes.
We have all the votes.
Play the vote, please. Carried.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So then we have one item remaining for today, which is sort of the opposite of last week's public hearing, which is still going. But let's hear the presentation on item 3.23.
Good afternoon. This is an application to rezone a site in the Windsor Park neighborhood from DC2 Site-Specific Development Control Provision to a new DC2 Site-Specific Development Control Provision. The proposed DC2 would allow for the development of a tall mid-rise residential building with commercial opportunities at the ground level. The proposed building would have a maximum height of 34 meters, approximately 11 stories, and a maximum density of 140 dwelling units. Next slide, please. The site is located at the northeast corner of 87th Avenue and 118th Street. It is within walking distance of the University of Alberta Education and Healthcare campuses. The site is surrounded by a mix of land uses to the west and is the Windsor Park Community League building and Windsor Park School. To the north is single detached housing, and to the south is also single detached housing with the exception of the St. George's Anglican Church. To the east is a 4-story apartment building. It is also in close proximity to alternative modes of transportation. 87th Avenue is both a local and community bus route, and bike lanes are available along 89th Avenue and 116th Street. Though not shown on the screen, both the University and Health Sciences LRT stations are within approximately 600 meters of the site. Next slide, please. This application represents the second attempt at redeveloping this site in the last several years, beginning with the site being rezoned in 2015 from a neighborhood commercial zone to a DC2 provision that allowed for an 8-story apartment building with commercial uses on the ground floor. This was then followed by another rezoning in 2016 to accommodate modifications to the building's form and function. Next slide, please. The site began construction in 2018, but halted after the excavation of 3-story underground parkade. The applicant has cited financial reasons for why the construction was stopped. Next slide, please. In November 2020, City Administration received and accepted a new rezoning application that proposed another mixed-use building with increases in height, density, and floor area ratio. Whereas the existing zoning allowed for a maximum height of 29.9 meters, approximately 8 stories, and 96 dwelling units, the new DC2 would allow for a maximum height of 40 meters, approximately 13 stories, and 160 dwelling units. The overall function of the building remained unchanged, particularly at ground level, where 87th Avenue was still defined by active commercial uses and 118th Street still being defined by both active commercial uses and ground-oriented dwellings. Next slide, please. In addition to the increases in height and density, the new DC2 proposed an improved building shape. Instead of the square-shaped building that is currently allowed by the existing zoning, shown on the left-hand side of the screen in orange, the new DC2 proposed an L-shaped building, shown on the right-hand side of your screen in green. In an effort to push the bulk of the building's massing away from its sensitive northern and eastern edges, this resulted in a smaller building floor plate and introduces a significant amount of open space in the northeast corner of the site, ultimately reducing the building's massing impact on the properties to the north and east. As such, the shape of the building is considered a significant improvement from what is currently permitted in terms of how the proposed building responds to its most sensitive edges. Next slide, please. From February 16th to March 9th of this year, City Administration hosted an engaged Edmonton web page to present the details of this application to the public and garner feedback and questions. The primary concerns heard were the negative impacts caused by the additional height, increased traffic issues, and pedestrian safety, particularly as it relates to the site being across the street from a school. And of course, given that this application represents the third rezoning since 2015, there was much frustration expressed from the neighborhood residents with regard to having to go through this process again. Also of note, a formal response provided by the Windsor Park Community League's Development Committee. Though the committee expressed support for the commercial uses at ground level and the improved shape of the building, they also identified 2 areas of concern for the application, which included the proposed height of the building and the lack of a mix of unit types within the building, primarily a desire to see more units that are specifically oriented to families. Next slide, please. Following discussions between city administration and the applicant team, changes were made to the application that included the following. A reduction in building height from 40 meters, or approximately 13 stories, to 34 meters, approximately 11 stories. A reduction of the floor area ratio from 6.4 to 5.8. A reduction in density from 160 dwellings to 140 dwellings. And a modification to a regulation within the DC2 provision that reduces the maximum percentage of studio apartments permitted in the development from 25% to 10%. Next slide, please. Shown on screen are the key differences between the final version of the proposed DC2 on the right-hand side and the existing DC2 provision on the left-hand side. This DC2 provision complies with policy C599 for community amenity contributions by requiring at least 3 dwelling units within the building to be family oriented. Other contributions previously met through the existing DC2 are carried forward into the new DC2. Next slide, please. Despite these changes, there are still additional impacts from the proposed DC2 that should be highlighted, particularly as it relates to the increase in height. As the proposed DC2 provision is requesting approximately 3 additional stories of height, there will be corresponding larger shadow and will spread further onto impacted properties. The images on screen depict the differences between the shadow that is produced by the proposed zoning and the existing zoning during the spring equinox, March 21st. Based on the sun shadow study, the slightly larger shadow will have further impacts on the school site to the west, as well as 2 residential properties to the north and northwest of the site. It also should be noted that the shadow, though longer in some cases, does become narrower to in some periods throughout the day. However, relative to the large side of the shadow that is already permitted by the existing zoning, this additional shadowing is considered to be minimal. Next slide, please. The city plan identifies the university area as one of 6 major nodes strategically located across the city. While there are no specific boundaries identified for these major nodes, they are considered to be up to 2 kilometers across. This site is within 700 meters both of the University Hospital and the core University of Alberta North Campus. As such, it is reasonable to consider this site as being within the major node. Next slide, please. Major nodes are large-scale urban centers that serve multiple districts and support high-density development in a wide mixture of land use. The desired overall density in the major node is 250 people and/or jobs per hectare, and the typical massing form is high-rise and mid-rise. In consideration of the fact that the site is located within a primarily low-density context, this site is considered more appropriate for the mid-rise rather than high-rise built form. Next slide, please. To conclude, administration is in support of this application as it appropriately balances a moderate increase in building height and massing with an improved building shape that transitions more sensitively to its surrounding. We'll continue to provide the opportunity for a mixed-use development along an arterial road and near major employment centers and LRT stops, increasing the livability and vibrancy of this established neighborhood, and supports the infill objective of the city plan by increasing density at an appropriate location within a major node. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mickelson. First up, we're going to hear from Mr. Pagnotta. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Alex Pagnotta, I'm the principal of Pagnotta Industries, and I want to speak today and give some background how we find ourselves in front of council today with some zoning modifications for the Windsor site. We were hired as a general contractor in late 2018 to build it for the previous developer. And as we got towards the completion of the parkade, it was becoming evident that the lender who had provided a commitment would pull their financing, and us and the other subtrades would be left unpaid. So as a way to ensure that our subtrades and our suppliers and other stakeholders, in an attempt to be made whole, we foreclosed on the site and and got it in November of last year. So we worked to find a design that would become financially viable, so that we could get it built and get the hole filled up. And the primary a lot of the factors were density. It needed to be a driver because of the existing excavation depth. Being that the site was contaminated, the previous developer had to dig 3 levels of parking to remove all the contaminants to get low enough to clean the site. So in essence, 3 levels of parking would have to be built and still need to be built. And the 3 levels of parking are somewhere between 140, 150 parking stalls. Previous design, which unfortunately failed, provided way too much parking for the unit count. So we were forced to build, now that we're forced to build a parkade for 140 stalls, we need to build 140 units to make the project work. The previous design, as mentioned, filled the entire project site and the building footprint. We met with the Community League on many occasions with good public consult. We knew how important the retail was, and I'm a strong believer that the retail needs surface parking for the retail to be successful. So that's why that northeast side of the site we left open for surface parking, and we hope that that'll help the retailers be successful, as well as keep visitors and retail patrons off the city parking. Yeah, and then the height comes into play, and contrary to many of the public comments and maybe even some of the comments today, we are not looking for 3 stories in height. I think we should be talking about meters, and we're looking for 4 additional meters, which is equivalent to about 1 story. The previous design had very, very high floor to ceiling heights. So a 9-story was probably higher than a 10-story. So we've, in the current design, have gone to normal ceiling heights of 9 feet. The previous design was between 10 and 10.5 feet of ceiling heights. So talking 9 stories versus 11 stories, really the height is only up by 1 story, which is the 4 meters. And we're going to try to make it 3 meters, just needed some design allowance. And today I asked the council and the residents of Windsor to please consider the distressed situation that we inherited. We have an empty hole there with a limited lifespan of the shoring that's in place. The community safety long-term is of concern, and this project urgently needs to move forward given the distressed situation that we find ourselves in. So I believe we've met and listened numerous times to the Community League. We took the public engagement community comments quite seriously, and it's reflected in the revised design. And I believe our well thought out design and retail plan will provide a central hub for the Windsor residents for many years. So with your support today, I assure you construction will start this summer. And by spring, summer of 2023, we will have a lively community-based development for all the residents to enjoy and for the city to get rid of an eyesore.
Thank you, Mr. Pagnotta. Questions, Councillor Henderson?
Yeah, just a few. Can you talk a little bit more about what happens if the hole is left? I'm remembering this from a situation the city got in. I'm guessing it doesn't last there forever.
No, so when we excavate and we have shoring, so that's the walls on the perimeter that support the soils. That's not a permanent design. So we've been monitoring the movement, and things are stable from an immediate concern, but there is movement. And eventually something needs to happen. The engineering on record has pulled. We have a new engineer that basically something has to happen, or a backfill order can be had. And once it's backfilled, it's you really can't do much with the site because you can't re-excavate because that shoring's not stable, right? So it really can put the situation in a very dangerous spot. So when it's left open, the frost as well starts pushing on the lower levels, which it's not designed for, because there should be a parkade in there. And yeah.
Well, and speaking of the parkade, because I know one of the concerns that I've heard that is arising is around traffic by the school and close to the school. But the reality is, the parkade's done. Are you putting in more parking spots than would have been in the old design? It's open option now, so we don't sort of nail down the number of parking spots. But is the intention to put in the same number of parking spots?
Right now, we're putting less. We were able to engineer our way out of, because the previous design was 3.5 levels, and we think we can, we stopped a little bit short of that other half level. We'll have to do some backfilling. And so we're going to provide less parking. So depends how you look at it. I mean, the previous design had 170 some stalls, so we're going to have less parking. So we'll have more people, but less cars.
Yeah. So it was being designed for a very different market. So and just to speak to that, just to clarity, I know you mentioned this, but it sounds like you're adding a lot of floors, but you're actually not adding a lot of height. Am I right about that? Can you?
Yeah. So the previous height had between 10 and I think 11-foot high floors, so very high because the high-end nature that they were targeting. And the new design is on a standard 9-foot floor-to-ceiling height. So if you add 1 or 1.5 feet per floor on 9 stories, you end up with 9 or 10 feet, which would have been the previous design was basically 10 stories high on a typical height basis.
Right. And then the final question is, can you talk about the effect? Because one of the things we heard last time was a lot of concerns from the Bentley. And I'm guessing by going to the L shape, that improves for them. I don't know if we're going to hear from them today. But what the benefits are going to the L shape, because that's part of the trade-off. You've created that L shape, and are doing the density in a different way, correct? Your FAR is pretty close to the same.
Yeah, so we moved the building away from the northeast corner, which I feel for the Bentley will be better because they'll have sight lines across rather than one massive wall down the alley of a building. I believe it'll attract better people in the building because you won't have units facing each other, which the previous design did. So yeah, I truly believe for the Bentley, this is a much better design.
Okay.
And for the northern neighbor as well, because there's less massing in front of you. The massing is now all concentrated on the south and west.
Right, and I can't remember, do you step down on the north? I think you do.
And we do step back on the north as well.
Yeah.
At every multiple levels, yeah.
So there's not a lot of step back along the avenue with the arterial, but in terms of the interface with the neighborhood, you've tried to put the step backs there, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much.
Next up, then, if there are no further questions for Mr. Pagnotta, next will be Bladen Dibben.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. Just have a couple of slides here. My name is Bladen Dibben. I'm a planner with Select Engineering Consultants. I just want to highlight some of the features of the proposed DC2 that help mitigate some of the impacts on the community. Access to the site is from 118th Street and 87th Avenue by way of the existing lanes, and then would be an underground parkade access from the back lane. As Alex has mentioned, currently there's excavation 3 stories deep for the parkade, which will accommodate parking for the residents. Commercial uses are located along the main floor fronting onto 87th Avenue and the corner of 118th Street. And there are parking stalls located on site for commercial users. Facing 118th Street is the residential building main entrance and as well as townhouse units at street level. So a priority for the design of the building was having sensitive transition to existing residential located to the north and to the east. The DC2 includes generous setbacks from the north, as Councillor Henderson had asked, and that mitigates the massing of the building from existing residents. So as shown on the site plan, the building is designed in the shape of an L. This keeps the main building addressing 87th Street or 87th Avenue and 118th Street corridors. By creating the L shape, the building becomes a bit slimmer and is pulled away from much of the Bentley building to the east and the residents to the north. Further to the L shape of the building, there are generous stepbacks from the north. For the 3-story portion of the building fronting on 118th Street, there's a 3.7 meter setback from the north property line. But when you add in the 6-meter alley, this amounts to about 10 meters from the nearest house. Could you please go to the next slide? So this elevation is looking from the west off of 118th Street, and you can more easily see the step backs. So it shows the step back of 3.7 meters from the property line plus the 6-meter alley. Then when you go to the 9-meter portion of the building, or the 9-story portion of the building, there's a 6.5 meter setback, so a total of 12.5 meters from the property line of the adjacent house. And then the 10th and 11th stories of the building are a total of 19.4 meters from that property line. So the closest any house is from the 10th and 11th stories is about 20 meters. That's the end of my presentation, and Ian Evans is also here. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Dibben?
Just one quick one. In terms of, and I'm sorry, because I don't have the details of what's already approved there. In terms of the traffic access, has it changed from the original design?
No, the original accessed off the lanes as well. There is an existing access from 118th, from 87th Avenue, but that's being closed.
That would have been closed either way, though, right? But there's nothing. But there's nothing. You're not changing the way in and out of the building for vehicles, because again, I know that traffic piece around the school is one of the questions that comes up. So that's not going to change from what's already permitted.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Just off the existing lanes that already exist.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
I see no further questions for Mr. Dibben at this time. So thank you very much. Next will be Ian Evans.
Next slide, please. So as mentioned by the last two presenters, the building footprint is significantly, well, a fair size smaller than what was originally proposed. You can see the difference between the proposed in green and then the previous DC in the red. For example, the main floor is 27% smaller than the previous proposal. And then the typical floors are about 13% smaller than the previous proposal. And as mentioned before, part of that is to allow for convenience parking for the retail. We felt that imposing people to have to go to the parkade to access the commercial didn't make sense. And for the success of the commercial, it needed to have that parking adjacency and also to eliminate the parking, that short-term parking that might happen on the street. That area was created. There was the benefit of also creating less of an imposing building mass adjacent to the adjacent residential properties. Next. So these are just comparisons from different views. Next. So you can see the difference in height is really just that 4 meters that we're talking about, particularly on the 87th Ave face. Next. 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 So while we were sensitive to the fact of trying to get the building mass away from the adjacent properties, we also wanted to, through material and color change, give a sense of the building terracing down to the adjacent properties. So this is the facade on 87th Ave. So there's a strong retail presence, a two-story commercial retail space that is bounded by an extension of a canopy that helps provide a pedestrian scale environment for people who are walking adjacent to the building face. So there is not an imposing building face straight up. There is a canopy that provides that suggestion of space. It's going to be lit beautifully underneath and provide that retail realm. Next. And then this terracing down happens around the building. This is the north face until it reaches a smaller scale single family development to the north. There's also screening that is provided at ground level from the the residential units that face onto the adjacent property. As well, it should be mentioned, there's proposed significant off-site improvements, both to provide a beautiful foreground to the building, but also to provide enhanced pedestrian experience along the building edges. Next. Next. I think that's it. That's the end of my presentation. Any questions?
Sorry, questions, Councillor Henderson? No? Anyone else have questions for Mr. Evans? Members of council? Okay, not hearing any. Thank you. I've never seen the red-green relative massing before. That's handy. Just as a bit of feedback, that was very helpful. Next, we're going to hear from Eric Sen. Or actually, no, Eric's questions only. Are there any questions for Mr. Sen? Not hearing any, then let's go next to speakers registered in opposition, starting with Bruce Sutherland.
Thank you very much for your time to listen to me. I do want to acknowledge from the start that the development proposed by Pagnata is indeed an improvement on what was there before, especially with the L-shaped design. Nonetheless, my major concerns are about the high occupancy, number of parking spaces, and of course the shadow on the Bentley, which is where I live. So this is the best I could do. I don't have the fancy graphics capability of the Pagnatas, but this is the best I could do for taking a pan shot of the area. It's taken from the corner of 87th Avenue and 118th Street, and it's showing the Windsor Park Elementary School and the Bentley condominium. If you go to the next slide, this is my poor rendition of what it looks like when you put the building next to it. And I don't know how much to scale the images we saw from the previous speakers, but this new building is almost 3 times the height. It doesn't seem to be the way in the perspectives that we just saw, but it's about 3 times the height. And notice when I say 34 meters, that actually doesn't go up to the top because there's also another 2 or 3 meters at the top of this new building. So without going to the details of all the reasons that me and so many of the Windsor Park community oppose this, I want to go to what happened in the September 15th meeting for reasons why this building, the original development, went ahead. You can go to the next slide. So I want to make it clear that the community was opposed to the previous development. The height of that was considered unacceptable. The number of parking spaces was considered unacceptable. And things really have not changed that much with this plan. For the reasons given to nonetheless let this development proceed despite the grave concerns of the Windsor Park community, one of them was this, that the Windsor Park has an aging population, and so it needs high density accommodation to attract younger community members. If you go to the next slide, in response to that, one of my big concerns is, although I don't know exactly how many, it seems that this is designed primarily to be single occupancy or perhaps couples, but not families. I don't think the units will have a large number of units that will accommodate families. And so you don't really meet that need with this. And besides that, with the proximity to the university, it's quite likely that it'll be high occupancy by university students who will be transient and not lay roots in the community. And that's one of the important things that the Windsor Park community would like to see. If you can go to the next slide. So this was the other main reason. It was a brownfield site. And the developer had said it's expensive to develop a brownfield site because you have to remove that contaminated dirt. So the only way they could make a profit is to build a large building. Well, my argument is, if you can go to the next slide, that the dirt has been removed. It's no longer a brownfield site. It is an ugly pit, but the present developer does not have to incur that cost of removing the dirt. So it is possible for them to put up a smaller building and still make it financially viable for them. So we can just go to my last slide. Yeah, so my opinion anyways is that this still does not satisfy the needs of the Windsor Park community, or even the city of Edmonton in terms of rejuvenating and building families, younger families in Windsor Park. I think it's financially feasible for the developer to build something that's more in line with what the Windsor Park community wanted way back in 2015. And I'll hope they consider once again redesigning to bring down the size of this building and the number of occupants and have larger spaces for families. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Questions from Councillor Henderson. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just, because I think we're in an interesting bind here. The reality is, and I did not support it at the time, but they have permission to build a certain building without ever coming back to council. I can't speak for them in terms of the, what the cost of the remedial, all those kind of things. But, if from where I sit, from a number of the things that were raised as concerns, particularly around the Bentley, this building is better than what they could build without even asking. Because it gives you that L shape, it opens up a whole bunch of the things that were concerns that I think I remember you particularly raising at the time. So, and I get it, people wish we had never, there's a whole bunch of people wish we'd never gone down that road to begin with, but that ship has sailed. So what we're looking at here is between those two, what they have the right to do, and a proposal that I think actually may solve some of the problems that were posed by you back when we were, not all of them, I get that, but some of them. So just wouldn't mind your thinking about that, because this does seem to fix, understanding that what people really wanted was a building the size of the Bentley, but that's not really here. The only people who have the power to do that are developers, and I suspect with a 3-story hull, that's problematic. But this building feels to me like it answers some of the concerns, not the height concerns, but some of the concerns that you guys raised back when we approved the original one. And sounds like you're in agreement with that piece. Am I right?
Indeed. I opened up by acknowledging exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
But, bottom line is my main opposition is the same as it was back in 2015.
Yeah, fair enough. I get that. Yeah, I get that. Okay, great. Thanks. I just wanted to explore that a little bit with you because, I hear the concerns that rose before, but we don't have the power to roll it back. We can only look at something that may allay some of the things that were put on the table before. So that's very helpful to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Sutherland? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to hear from Sharon DeWall.
Hi there. Thank you very much for your time listening to me speak as well. Some of the pieces that I'm going to talk about, and I know I'm not going to belabor the points that we can't change what's been approved in the past, but that previously the city has come up with transit-oriented development guidelines, the document What We Heard, infill stakeholder engagement results, and of course, the way we move, the way we green, the way we live. This development is over 6 stories, and technically on the transit-oriented design guidelines, it should be on a site that's over 1 hectare large. This is a site that's only 0.2 hectares large, so I think that's an important piece. It should also improve pedestrian and bike access because we are so close to transit and the university and so many other employers. And again, and I know this can't be changed, but it is 0 meters from the south and to the west. So that means it's directly abutting the sidewalk. As someone who has an infill home, I was required by the city to maintain 4 meters away from the sidewalk. So I think that's important to consider. And then also, this building has been compared to some of the buildings in Lister Hall buildings, which range from 5 to 12 stories. But again, those buildings have a large setback from the sidewalk to the actual buildings. And I think that's an important piece to consider. In this new bylaw as well, the green sustainability practices and targets have been removed. And again, as an owner of a net zero home and a big proponent of the way we green and the way we build, it is disappointing to see that that will now be removed and an additional 4 meters will be added to the building. And then lastly, in the what we heard infill stakeholder engagement results, city administration and Edmontonians identified a missing middle in terms of infill housing, and that included row homes, low-rise apartments, mid-rise apartments less than 6 stories. In the previous development, there were 6 units that were family-oriented and 8 townhomes that would be in there. Right now, we're looking at 3 family-oriented units in a building that has more occupancy available to it. So I just wanted to highlight those points on behalf of my neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. Wall. Questions? Councillor Henderson?
No, I think that's fine. I'll ask some questions of administration based on what Mr. Wall's shared. So thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Wall from members of council? Okay, not seeing any. Then I'll go back to Councillor Henderson for questions of city planners. Go ahead.
Well, I'll maybe start with that sustainability piece, because, and I'm going to ask this a little bit generically, because I suspect this is around history, and we used to put those sustainability controls into DCs, and we have stopped doing that. And I'm just wondering, I think there's a larger question there that is more than, there used to be an almost standard thing that we put into direct controls. And we've moved away from doing that. This question came up recently on another project, and I'm really curious about that.
That is exactly the case, Councillor Henderson. It was something that we previously put into DC2s, but it isn't something that actually belongs in zoning. It's something better suited for the energy guidelines or the building code. So we have been proactively not adding sustainability measures into new DC2 regulations for quite some time.
Well, given some of our other debates, I would have been nice to have had more discussion about that, quite frankly, because I'm not sure I entirely agree with that. And it was something we were doing almost as a kind of given. And there's no reason to believe that Mr. Pagnotta is not going to follow through with those same things in our building code to change. But I raise it as a concern that it, probably, especially as we're doing the zoning bylaw, and we've had a number of questions about what we can regulate and what we can't, and the zoning bylaw may be one of the things we can look at around this question, given the city's other targets. I'm a little bit concerned that they were just, and I hadn't noticed that they were dropped. So at some point, it would be good to have a better discussion about that. So.
Councillor Henderson, if I could just comment, we will be having that discussion through the zoning bylaw renewal on the climate and energy topic.
Yeah. I think most of the other things I have already had answered. I mean, it's just, are there any other things that we're missing that because I don't think that was mentioned in the reports, and we didn't have a way of comparing the two. Are there other kind of changes between the two that were not in the report? I mean, I'm guessing that the reduction in townhouses is the price you pay for having the L shape.
Yes, there was the live work units that were at the ground level, so that is no longer there. We do have the required 3 family-oriented dwellings as part of the community amenity contribution. But the live work units are no longer there at ground level. We weren't able to do the traditional track changes because the formatting.
I understand why you can't. It's just when we don't even have it to look at, it's hard. Even if being able to read it and look through it ourselves. And I'm guessing those extra the work units and lower floor units were where the extra family units were in the previous one as well, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's also worth noting that after consultation with the Community League, there was the provision added to only allow for the maximum of 10% studio units in the building.
Okay, which is the other way up, somewhat something of the same question.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks. Those are my questions.
Other questions from members of council for city planners? Not seeing any. Under new information, is there any new information from the proponents? Mr. Pagnotta?
Yeah, I'd like to comment maybe on the, we do have a meeting tomorrow with city administration in terms of the Brownfield grant, which would push us to LEED Silver. So that is in the works. It's not in the DC2, but if we are successful getting the assignment from the previous developer, we will be proceeding with a LEED Silver. But there's some complications that occurred during the foreclosure process, and we just need to get that assignment to us. And if that Brownfield grant is successfully assigned to us, we will be pursuing a LEED Silver.
Thank you, Mr. Pagnotta. Councillor Henderson, questions?
Well, just to follow up on that a little bit. So I think part of the suggestion was that you still are having to carry the costs of cleaning up the site, right? I mean, you assumed all of those expenses, so they didn't magically vanish.
No, yeah, quite frankly, yeah, we've paid all the bills. So that entire excavation has been out of our pocket, and all the cleanup and remediation, and yeah, so.
Right, because otherwise you couldn't go for the Brownfield grant. You wouldn't get the Brownfield grant if that had been covered from someone else.
Yeah.
If we're giving it to you for the cleanup, okay.
Yeah, but
and I'm remembering now, and because of the level of Brownfield grant you went for, that commits you to doing LEED Silver, which probably would answer some of the things. So you're committed to doing those sustainability pieces for a different reason, despite the fact they're not in the DC?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, if we successfully get the Brownfield grant, then yes, we have property tax relief that is obviously a financial motivator to recoup the costs that we have.
But also an obligation. It also that grant obliges you to do LEED Silver, does it not?
100%. You can't get the grant without achieving LEED Silver. So,
great.
But we just need the grant assigned to us. So, yeah.
And Councillor Caterina, could you take the chair for just a moment?
I've got the chair, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And Mr. Pagnotta, you said that, or one of your colleagues, I'm not sure, I think it was you, said that you stopped digging at three stories down, even though the original design was going to be 3.5. I'm guessing those are staggered, like, and so you saved yourself a bit of excavation there, and you said there'd be a bit of backfilling potentially. Did you look at if the parking was over excavated and the sort of part of what was driving the performa was the amount of parking that needs to be accommodated? Did you look at any scenarios where you might backfill further, so there's say only 1 or 2 stories of parkade underneath? And because I think that question came up from one of the neighbors. And, so did you look at that as an option?
Yes, absolutely. The biggest challenge is once you excavate soils, it no longer have bearing capacity. So regardless, the footings and foundations would have to stay at that lower level. And then construction logistics to put foundations at that lower level, then build piers basically up. You would need to build either piles or column piers to get up to whatever level that you want to start from. And that's a very complicated and expensive process. So yeah, once soil is disturbed, you're pretty much, your footings have to be at that level. And yeah, we definitely looked at some scenarios, and yeah, it's not really viable.
Well, and this is your business, I know. So I'm sure you would have looked at all the angles, but so I take it then the most economic answer is not to backfill and do elaborate pilings and other things, but simply to box it in and then at least use it as something with some theoretic economic value, which is as car storage.
Yeah. I mean, the only way out of the hole was to build a parkade. If you backfilled the hole and drilled piles, 60 feet down to the soil, to other soils, I mean, you could be spending as much as building the parkade itself. So, I sympathize with a lot of the comments, but I just really felt we put the best possible scenario to, get out of the situation. And that's kind of where we're coming from. We're trying to get out of a situation versus having bought a piece of land and looking for an opportunity, right? So,
Understood. I appreciate the answers. That's helpful. I'll take the chair back from Councillor Caterina.
I'll return the chair.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Pagnotta? Not seeing any. Any other new information from the proponent side? Mr. Dibben or Mr. Evans?
No.
Okay. Then from those in opposition, Mr. Sutherland, did you have any new information you wanted to respond to arising from what's been discussed so far?
Maybe just to follow up on your questioning, Mayor Iverson, one possibility is to have one floor of underground businesses. For example, originally in the design, there were going to be medical services provided. You could have dental offices, massage, chiropractic. That could be one floor below ground with parking the 2 floors below. So other than thinking infill, that's another possibility to reduce the number of parking spots and still have a service to the community.
You got me thinking for a minute. I was thinking speakeasy, but that might not be a desirable. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Any questions for Mr. Sutherland on the new information? No? Okay, how about Ms. DeWall? Any new information?
No new information.
Okay,
I will move close to the public hearing then.
thank you. Seconded by Councillor Walters. All right, please vote on closure of the public hearing.
Yes.
And we're waiting for Councillor Banga's vote.
Yes.
Thank you. That's all the votes.
Slide vote. That's carried.
And I will move first reading of 3.23, and I wouldn't mind speaking to it.
Sure. Seconder?
Second.
I'll speak to it too.
Okay. Councillor Henderson, do you want to close? Or,
Sure, I'll close. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Walters then?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to, very briefly say that I will support this. I just want to recognize Mr. Pagnotta and team for their commitment here, their creativity, and their willingness to essentially save this project and at the end of the day do something I think that's very beneficial to that part of Edmonton. So just wanted to throw that recognition your way, and I will support this enthusiastically. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Caterina, if you could take the chair.
I've got the chair, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Just briefly, not to repeat too much of what Councillor Walters just said, and mindful that this was controversial when it came forward previously at the height and mass that it did. But I do think this is a substantial improvement overall in the form of the building, and that notwithstanding that there is a degree of sort of salvage operation happening here, that I think that this is a good looking building. We've heard commitment to pursue LEED Silver subject to one of the key brownfield points, and I think that that's understood. But clearly it's it's a desirable location. I think the expansion of long-term amenities along that corridor is very consistent with the city plan. It is a transit corridor already. There's a lot of walkable destinations nearby. And I think what's been proposed, again, is a net improvement over what was previously presented and deals with the urgent issue of the hole in the ground today with a solution that also allows the businesses and subtrades who were involved up to this point to be made whole, which is not strictly speaking a land use consideration, but it's very much in this climate, but at the best of times, something that where we do need to be a little bit creative. And in this case, I don't see us being asked to grant significant concessions to allow those changes to occur, but thoughtful concessions and changes to make it market viable given the circumstances. And I learned something about excavation and parkades today, which was fascinating. So I think with that curiosity nurtured and with encouragement to deliver something that will be a net gain in terms of activity, positive activity in the neighborhood, and more neighbors to support those businesses as well. Just gratitude to everyone also for the work. So I'll leave it there. Obviously, I'll support the bylaw. I'll take the chair back and go back to Councillor Henderson to close if there's no one further. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, no, I, as you know, have in the past been no big fan of some of the iterations of this project, except ironically, some of the ones that you never got to see, which were some of the first ones I was shown way back in time. And up until now, every iteration I've seen of this project since then has made it worse, not better, until this one. And I actually do think this one improves on what we've already approved. I think it deals with one of what helps. It doesn't deal perfectly, but it helps with one of my major concerns before, which was the effect on the Bentley. And I don't think it makes any of the other things that people were concerned about, like the traffic around the school and some of those pieces. It doesn't make them worse, and hopefully will make it somewhat better. So I recognize that this is literally, they've dug themselves into a hole, quite literally, on this. In some ways, I regret that road went down, because I think if Mr. Pagnotta was starting right now, probably a lot of the other things that are being raised could have been dealt with in a different kind of way. But I think the real worry is if this building cannot go forward in a way that's viable, it will be undevelopable in the future, because once you fill that hole back in, you can't. You're dealing with loose dirt. And we know from our experience previously the danger of a hole left too long, and how close we came to losing the entire site in exactly the same way. So I recognize that, and I would also say that I think we've had a lot of talk about city plan recently. And this, unlike some of the other proposals we've been talking about recently, is actually, right next to the university, and is not internal to a neighborhood in any kind of way. It's on an arterial. I think it's not a high rise. It's still a mid rise. So I actually think probably this fits better with what we now know around city plan that we didn't know when we first did this proposal. And probably is in the kind of location, if we're going to do these kind of things, that we need to start considering on this kind of missing middle median height on an arterial road on the outside to neighborhoods, doing its best to mitigate the effect it has on the interior of the neighborhood. So I will be supporting it, and hopefully this is the last time we will have to hear this item, and the next thing we know, there'll be a building there. So with that, I would urge everybody to support it.
Thank you. Please vote.
Yes.
Councillor Zadig? Yeah. Thank you. That's all the votes.
By the vote. Carried unanimously.
I will move second reading of 3.23.
Second.
Please vote.
Second.
Councillor Walters was seconder there. Please vote on second reading.
Yes.
We have all the votes.
Display the vote, please. Carried.
I will move consideration of hearing third reading on 3.23.
Second.
To allow third reading to proceed, please vote.
Yes.
Councillor Zadek?
Yes.
We have all the votes.
Display the vote, please. Carried. Last but not least.
And I will move third reading of Charter Bylaw 19709.
Second.
Please vote on third and final reading.
Yes.
We have all the votes.
Display the vote, please. It's carried unanimously. As was just pointed out to me by Councillor Knack, that this public hearing is done before the last public hearing, which is no small feat. But I must now check for, so a reminder that last week's and the week before's public hearing will continue at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow. So see you then. But in the meantime, I'll check to see if there are any notices of motion. Hearing none, then we are done for the day. Thank you.
And hopefully through all the Ward 8 stuff. You never know.